Hello, kiddos. We're going to talk about EPA 608 certification. We're going to cover the area of passive recovery. Previously, in part one, we did active recovery, which uses a recovery machine. I don't know if you can see the picture up there on the monitor, but that is the active recovery, which uses external recovery machine to recover the refrigerant. Passive recovery uses the air conditioning system itself. This is a window unit. This is a condenser, evaporator, discharge line from the compressor, the intake, the suction line of the compressor. So when we're recovering the regulated refrigerants out of the system, there's a couple of things we need to know. One, is the compressor working or is the compressor not working? If the compressor is working, we need to be able to recover 90% of the refrigerant and leave it at a 4 inches of vacuum. If the compressor is not working, we need to be able to recover at least 80% of the refrigerant at a 4 inches of mercury. Vacuum, which is mercury. All right, so there's a couple of things that would help us remove the refrigerant out of the system. If the compressor's working, we'll hook up to the, they're usually an access tube right here. It's usually on the compressor, but on this one it's not. We could put a piercing valve on here and hook up a bag that should be in a vacuum. Recovery cans, especially when you get a brand new one or a fresh one, it should be in a vacuum. If the recovery can, if this recovery can is empty and it's not in a vacuum, you need to put it in a vacuum. All right. You just like if you were getting ready to charge a system, you have to dehydrate the can and make sure there's no non-condensables in it, because we don't want to contaminate the refrigerant that we're putting in the recovery can. All right. So need to hook up a temporary access valve right here. And on a temporary access valve, remember it says temporary. We should not leave it on there. Once we pull out the refrigerant and do the repairs, we should put a permanent access valve on here, braze one on. All right. So again, the best way to recover from a system, especially if the compressor is not working, we should recover from both sides, from the low side and the high side of the system. Okay. But most of the time, if the compressor is working, you really just need to recover on one side of the system. Okay. And it's usually the high side. So when you access the high side, you hook it up to the recovery can and you made sure it was in a vacuum. All right. So when you open it up, the vacuum should pull out all the refrigerant from the system, especially if you're using one of those recovery bags that were designed for pulling refrigerant out. It should pull out as much as the refrigerant as you can at that point. And to aid it, to speed it up, and to make sure you got it all out, you can take a little rubber mallet and tap on the compressor to shake up the oil to get the refrigerant out of the oil. Also, you can heat and use an external heating source. Sometimes these compressors have a crankcase heater or a heater wrapped around the compressor. You can turn it on, or you can have one yourself and put it on there and then turn on the heat on there and heat up the system and get the refrigerant out of there that way. Okay. One of the things I do not recommend, and it's dangerous, is put a flame to it. Do not do that. That is bad. That is not a good idea. Okay. But you can put some heating blankets or like I said, I carried around a crankcase heater that I had taken off of a system, and I just put it on there and strap it down and turn it on and tap on it when I'm pulling the refrigerant out. Okay. Also remember, if you put the access valve on there and it reads 0, you can't start to evacuate the recovery process. You just can't, because one, there's just nothing there to recover. Okay. Again, passive recovery system is using the air conditioning system itself, using its own compressor. If the compressor is operable, You need to get 90% of refrigerant out at a 4 inches of vacuum, right? If the compressor is not working, you need to recover at least 80% of the refrigerant at a 4 and leave it at a 4 inches of vacuum. All right. How do you help yourself doing that? Rubber mallet and heating it up a little bit without using an open flame. Okay. How do you, if the compressor is working, you only really need to access the high side of the system. If the compressor is inoperable, you need to access on both the high and low side of the system to be able to pull from both sides of it to make sure you can get it out. And access valves or the temporary access valves cannot stay on. They need to be removed and you put on a permanent one. Also, the gauges that you use need to have manual or auto sealing lines. Okay. Again, passive recovery is using the air conditioning equipment itself, internal system itself, the compressor. Okay. Active recovery is an external recovery equipment that is used outside of the system itself. It's a recovery machine. But in this video, we're talking about passive. Passive is talking about using its own compressor to help recover the system. And if the compressor's working, it'll be real easy to pull the refrigerant out. But the difficulties come when the compressor's inoperable and trying to make sure you get all the refrigerant out of the system inside here. Again, recovery can needs to, if it's a new can, needs to be in a vacuum when you're pulling it out. And when you're doing these type of systems, it's better to just have one of those disposable type recovery bags that you can send off, ship off. It's one-time use recovery bags, right? If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Again, passive recovery, right here. Also, one other thing I forgot. Up to about 15 pounds of refrigerant, you can do passive, but after 15 pounds or more, you're required to use a recovery machine. The maximum refrigerant is 15 pounds of refrigerant, and then after that, you have to use a recovery machine. Hopefully, this answered all your questions. See you on the flip side.